Hello and welcome to eChinese Learning Pod, your go-to podcast for learning Chinese and exploring Chinese culture. To protect speakers' privacy and enhance audio quality, some or all voices in this episode are created with AI assistance.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you've ever lived in a really competitive, high-pressure environment, a big city, a demanding job, even university, you probably know that feeling of running faster and faster just to, stay in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're diving into the cultural vocabulary that has sprung up from what is, I think, arguably the world's most intense competitive pressure cooker, modern Chinese internet culture.
And these aren't just, fleeting memes. We're talking about three concepts that have become incredibly popular because they just perfectly capture this shared anxiety.
Right.
And they also describe the different ways young people are coping. The terms are
内卷、躺平
and
摆烂
Involution, lying flat, and giving up. And what our source material makes so clear is that these aren't just like isolated feelings. They almost form a sequence, don't they?
They absolutely do. The intense pressure leads to this kind of rational resistance, which then sometimes is just punctuated by emotional fatigue.
Yeah.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, to go way beyond the literal translations. We want to use these terms as diagnostic tools almost to understand the sociological shift they represent.
The moment when the promise of hard work pays off just starts to feel a bit hollow.
Exactly. We need to get at the structural why behind this whole shift in attitude.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We should probably start with the root cause, the term that I think is most crucial to understanding this whole landscape.
内卷
Involution.
What's so fascinating here is that the term has this deep, almost academic history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it started as an anthropology term. It described a phenomenon where a system, let's say an agricultural economy, it just sort of grows more and more complex internally, but without actually achieving any real expansion or structural change.
So, the system hits a wall,
Yeah.
and instead of finding a new wall to climb, everyone just starts polishing the old one really, really hard.
That is a perfect analogy.
But
Precisely. And it jumped from academia to the mainstream internet around 2020 because it was the perfect word to describe modern urban life. The sources define it as being stuck in a vortex of meaningless competition.
Okay, that word meaningless seems key. I mean, how is this different from just normal, healthy competition? We all compete for jobs, for grades.
The source material is very clear on the mechanism here. It's what happens when resources are limited and there's just no way for people to make real external progress.
So you can't improve the whole system or your collective status.
Exactly. So people get trapped in this cycle of competition that, in the end, yields no real gain for everyone. You pour in the maximum effort, but your effort is immediately canceled out because everyone else is doing the exact same thing.
So the net result is just exhaustion, not real advancement.
Right.
And there's no better illustration of this, I think, than the examples from the education system. Let's talk about that tutoring arms race.
Yeah, the classic example of involution is all about grades. Imagine a class where one parent decides their kid needs after-school tutoring to get an edge,
Right.
but then every parent does it. So when every single student signs up, the average scores might go up, but the relative class rankings, they stay exactly the same. The effort just becomes mandatory to maintain the status quo.
It's an arms race, and the only real winner is the tutoring industry itself. The societal effort is wasted, the anxiety on students and parents is huge, but if you step off that treadmill, you feel like you'll instantly fall behind.
And that desperation, that performative effort, it translates perfectly into the workplace.
Yeah.
The classic corporate example of
内卷
is the overtime culture.
We've all seen this, this scenario. The work could clearly be done by 5 p.m., but people still insist on staying late just to compete over who looks the most hardworking.
That is the very definition of purely involution. The competition isn't about delivering a new product or solving a big problem. It's about performative presence. You're spending your own finite resources, your time, your energy, not on being productive, but on signaling loyalty through sheer exhaustion. It just drains everyone and pushes up the baseline expectation of effort without any more pay or better results.
It's a self-inflicted wound, really, but one that society pressures you to accept. And the source even points to this happening with something as simple as, consumer goods.
Yes, that milk tea shop example is delightful. When you can't innovate a new product or expand your market, the competition just boils down to these tiny internal improvements.
Like competing over who has more toppings.
Exactly. It drives up cost and complexity for all the shops, but it doesn't really make the customer's experience fundamentally better. The focus just turns inward, and that's the absolute heart of involution.
Okay, so if
内卷
is this relentless, irrational arms race that costs everyone their sanity and their free time, what's the logical response to that?
Well, that brings us directly to
躺平
or lying flat. And what's really interesting here is that
躺平
is explicitly defined as a gentle way to resist.
内卷
A gentle resistance.
Yeah, it's a calculated, rational retreat from the front lines of that competition.
So it's not just apathy. It's more of an active choice, an assertion of your own self-worth outside of that competitive system.
Exactly. The core of it is deciding to actively lower your material desires and just reduce the amount of competition you engage in. The goal is to find inner peace, find comfort through a low-cost, low-pressure life.
And this idea really took off, didn't it?
It exploded in 2021. An online article called Lying Flat is Justice went viral overnight. It just gave a name and a structure to a feeling that so many people already had.
It makes sense. If the competitive effort is proving to be irrational, then the most rational choice is to minimize that effort. It sounds like strategic minimalism for your life goals.
And you see it in really profound personal choices. In the workplace, an individual might actively decide, you know what, I don't want to compete anymore. I'm just going to lie flat and leave work on time.
It's about setting a firm boundary, realizing the return on working late just isn't worth the cost to your life.
Mm-hmm. And you see it in the really big life decisions, too. The sources point to the practice of not chasing luxury brands and, maybe most importantly, rejecting the huge traditional milestone of buying a house.
Wow, yeah.
A minimalist life, one that's free from massive debt and expectation, is described as the way of lying flat.
That decision to opt out of the housing market is probably the biggest cultural statement you could make.
It really is. It's a rejection of the single greatest debt burden and, the decades of competition you need to service that debt. If the system is only offering you immense debt in exchange for constant,
内卷
then lying flat is just this radical acceptance of that fact and a refusal to play.
And you see it filter down to even like basic social stuff. The sources talk about rejecting meaningless social activities on the weekends.
Right. Instead of going out to network or keep up with stressful social duties, you just decide to stay home, lie flat, and watch a TV series.
It's prioritizing actual comfort over performative socializing.
Yeah. But
躺平
is a sustainable long-term philosophy. And, maintaining that rational detachment can be hard when life throws these overwhelming challenges at you.
Okay.
When you hit an emotional wall, the immediate reaction can shift from a calculated retreat to more of a temporary, playful surrender. And that is where
摆烂
comes in.
So, giving up. How do we distinguish
摆烂 from 躺平
if lying flat is this calm, rational choice? What's the tone of
摆烂
The difference is really duration and tone.
躺平
As a lifestyle,
摆烂
as a coping mechanism. The sources describe
摆烂
as having a playful, almost self-mocking tone. It's about letting things go downhill.
say
It's that short-term release of bad feelings when a situation just seems genuinely impossible to fix.
And it has a really interesting origin, right, from the sports world.
It does. It originally described a team that was intentionally losing games to get a better draft pick later on, a calculated loss for a future gain. But now, in its common use, it just means stopping trying and letting things get worse because the situation is too hard to improve. It's an immediate surrender.
I think we can all relate to that kind of emotional exhaustion. The examples from academics are pretty spot on.
So the classic one, a student just didn't study at all for a course. Instead of pulling an impossible all-nighter and stressing themselves out, they just declare, I'm going to just go to give up on this exam.
It's a preemptive declaration of failure. It minimizes the psychological damage of trying your best and still failing.
Exactly. Or in a really high-stress, immediate context like online gaming. When things outside your control, like a terrible team, become too much, the player just announces they're going to start giving up in the match. The control is gone, so the effort is withdrawn.
Right.
And that feeling of resignation mixed with temporary relief can be super therapeutic in a high-pressure work environment. A project hits a major bottleneck, and instead of pushing deeper into the
内卷
vortex, the team decides to give up for half a day first and then try to find a solution tomorrow.
That's basically just rebranding a mental health break as a moment of defeat. It's a great way to release that pressure valve.
And of course, there's the most relatable daily use, the self-mocking reaction to failure. Your weight loss plan fails again, so you declare you're giving up and eating hot pot.
Yes.
It acknowledges the failure, accepts it with a laugh, and immediately turns that defeat into a kind of short-term celebratory indulgence.
This is where it gets really interesting, I think, when we step back from the definitions. We've defined the pressure,
内卷
the resistance,
躺平
and the coping.
摆烂
But why do these specific terms matter so much right now as cultural signs?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the popularity and normalization of this vocabulary is absolutely critical. It shows this is not just a case of young people being inherently lazy or negative or trying to avoid the world.
No, the reaction.
It's a direct, collective, and measurable reflection of growing competition pressure during a really profound social and economic transition.
The narrative for decades has always been, work hard, follow the rules, and you'll move up. These terms suggest that whole narrative is starting to fail.
Precisely. The core belief that has really underpinned success for generations, that hard work will pay off, is being actively and visibly challenged by reality. The pressure mounts because the balance of resource distribution starts to visibly tilt. If you increase your input, your effort, but you don't see a proportional change in your output, in your reward or status, then the entire competitive game just loses its meaning.
So this slang is actually functioning as a critical social tool, a kind of mass self-diagnosis.
Absolutely. These words let young people vent their anxiety and, crucially, find other people who feel the exact same way. It's a mass realization that the system is demanding irrational effort. It turns private anxiety into a collective recognition.
So where does that leave us? What does it all mean? Your sources seem to caution against just judging
躺平摆烂
as negative, or, on the other hand, blindly getting swept up
内卷
vortex.
Yeah, for the individual, the key takeaway is about finding your own pace in the competition. It's about refusing to blindly follow everyone else into that vortex of performative effort.
Right.
And making sure that no matter what the system demands, you leave some genuine free time for your own well-being.
But the analysis doesn't just stop at individual self-care, does it? It points to a much bigger societal imperative. That's the real conclusion from the sources.
The more important action, according to the analysis, is a systemic one. Society has to create a fairer, competitive environment and actively improve how resources are distributed. And this isn't just about tweaking a few rules, it's about a fundamental realignment of the system.
Because that alignment is how the vortex of
内卷
can become a track for healthy competition.
Exactly. The hard work has to yield the rewards it deserves. If you can restore that proportional relationship, the irrationality just disappears. If the competitive environment is structured fairly, the incentive to opt out, to lie flat, or give up it diminishes significantly.
They're a symptom, not the disease.
Right. These coping mechanisms exist because the competitive reality is fundamentally tilted.
That brings our deep dive full circle. We started with the suffocating pressure of involution, we charted the rational resistance of lying flat, and we analyzed the self-mocking temporary coping of giving up. It's a really powerful and deeply human snapshot of modern socioeconomic reality.
And as we think about the source material's conclusion that the real solution is systemic fairness, it raises an important question for you to think about. If resource distribution truly determined the outcome of hard work, would these coping mechanisms just disappear completely? Or are things like
躺平摆烂
permanent fixtures of any modern high-pressure society, no matter how fair it is? What stands out to you?
A truly crucial question for the years ahead. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thank you for joining us.
Want to practice what you've learned today with a real Chinese teacher? You can get a free one-on-one trial lesson at eChineseLearning.com. That's it for today's episode of eChinese Learning Pod. Thanks for tuning in.